Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Gray Area here on the Black Men Unfiltered Network, simulcasting on the Sparta HQ Network. I'm Mr. Bennett with my partner, as always,
This is Sparta!
the ghost of Sparta, aka Peter, aka Body Otis. Yasu, my brother, what is going on?
What is going on this rainy night? Actually,
It's raining with you? Nah, actually, we got a couple. It rained all week here. But we got a couple days of decent weather and whatnot, so I was able to finally cut my grass. It was like growing like up to a foot tall, so I was able to get to it and cut it down. So everything is good. But we want to welcome everyone again to another edition of the Gray Area. We ask that certainly as you come in tonight, make sure you hit the like button on both networks. Make sure you go over to the Sparta HQ Network, hit the like button there. Certainly we appreciate that there. Also, when you come in tonight, considering certainly dropping a Cash App, certainly to the Black Man Unfiltered Network, or certainly to us. Certainly in the chat as well. Support us, super chats. Certainly we appreciate any help that you give us in that regard as well. So again, we appreciate you guys being with us. So I was out of time. I was out last week, but I had a good excuse. All right. So obviously it was Mother's Day. And so even though my mother has gone on to glory, certainly my wife, we decided to go down to a concert down in Atlantic City. And we saw, certainly some old school acts, and one thing that it did, it certainly made me more mindful of my own mortality or the spaces that I occupy. I don't feel my age that often, but that particular night, we felt it because the acts we saw, the main acts was the Whispers. So again, for those of you who are familiar with 70s and 80s music, so when the beat goes on, and certainly those acts or Rocksteady and all of those hits from back in the day they used to play on the radio stations. I know my man Anton's in the building tonight. Shout out to him. So Anton, I'm sure you remember WBLS 107.5 and Kiss FM 98.7. So certainly back in the day, that was certainly one of the hits that was played back then. So we had that. We also had the Force MDs. So for those of you who go all the way back to 1985 and Crush Groove and Run DMC and all those groups. So Force MDs was a rap music group that had some hits, Tend to Love or Forgive Me.
The only
Girl.
question I got for you right now
is,
should I get you Walker Ray when you're popping and grinding?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. Right now, I'm good. But it was interesting because
I think my mom has an extra one downstairs. You want me to get it for you? Bring it to you next Sunday.
I still got my dad's wheelchair here in my garage here. So I think I got a few canes too. So I think I'm ready. I got crutches. I think I got a lot of the senior stuff ready if I need it. But one of the things that for sure was when you were in there, you realize it's like, oh, we're a part of this age group. If you're going back 40 years ago, so you talk about folks 55 to 70 years old. So this is R Payne. Shout out to our guy R Payne. This is certainly their certainly that generation. So you had a lot of people with canes, you had a lot of people with walkers, you had a lot of people with those carts and the buggies and everything. And I'm just thinking to myself, it's like, man, that's the first time I went into a place and realized that I was old. But we got to recognize that, look, for the type of music that we look like, 70s, 80s, 90s house music and things of that nature. Yeah, we got to recognize that we're in that older Gen X baby boom generation. But we were just, my wife and I were looking at ourselves as like, we're probably like, fitter than 90% of the people in this room. Because again, we generally don't feel, we don't certainly have need for those things. Yes, we got sore knees sometimes and whatnot, but we still work out pretty aggressively and we still have full function in terms of what we're doing. And but you realize that a lot of people who were there, so they get up, they try to do their little dance or whatever. And, they had like I said, they had a cane or they had something where they can kind of move. They do that old school, that uncle two-step, plus also the attire of a lot of the guys who were in there. So it was like, a lot of those OGs, they had, looking like that unk look, with the crazy suits and the hats and so just a lot of old school wear. I don't tend to dress old. I don't think I dress young, but I certainly don't dress old. So you had a lot of those guys with the you had a lot of people in that category or whatnot. But I had to realize it's like, yeah, this is my group. If my wife and I wanted to go on a party boat or something like that, we'd probably be hanging out with these type of people. You didn't see too many 30, 35-year-olds there. So that was definitely an eye opener. So if anything, I got motivated to be in better shape. So look, I need to stay as fit as I can for as long as I can. So I still train hard. I still do.
So, Paul, I'm
Yeah.
giving you a little advice. All
Good.
right. So there is a little thing called Blue Chew. Prescription is very cheap for you at this age. It's only like I think $20 or $30, something like that. You can order it online and ship to your house, privacy alone. Your wife will be very happy when you get a Blue Chew subscription in. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, all I'm saying is this: all options are on the table. But my thing is definitely taking care of all that. I take my vitamins, I take my supplements, I take whatever I got to do to make sure that I stay again in the game, active, whatnot. Now again, I admit that I'm not in my 20s anymore. 20s, it was like automatic. That was a different time. But certainly nowadays, you might need a little assistance here and there. But
Pick me up.
call it that. Yeah, like an energy drink. Sometimes you need a Red Bull to kind of get you going a little bit. But certainly appreciate. Shout out to Anton, and this is again Happy Haitian Flag Day. So certainly my man is a very proud Haitian. Comes from certainly knows his history, and certainly we salute them. They were the first nation to go independent. Certainly the slaves that were on the island, they were the first ones to declare their independence. Back in the day, I believe that was don't hurt me, Anton. I want to say 1804. If that's incorrect, you can certainly put it out there. But I thought Haitian independence, I think, was 1804. But you can check me on that if you need to. But certainly so shout out to the group. My man Eric's in the building this night. Had a little trouble getting on, but certainly glad to be here. Glad he's here tonight. But let's get into this, man. So I know you brought up this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been other shows on the certainly on the Black Men Unfiltered Network, and even in the gray area where we've talked about senior care. We've talked about death planning. We've talked about estate planning, and caring for loved ones and whatnot. And I know on this on the Black Men Unfiltered, you have the Plug show that comes on I believe on Sundays, early Sundays, I believe at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where they've certainly, we've dealt with the topic. I was privileged to be on a show with No Captivity with Freezy. Shout out to that brother and the content that he's doing. Definitely go check him out. And we talked about the fact that certainly we were caregivers for our parents, and certainly for him, in his younger years, he had to do that since he was in his early 20s. When he was in college, he had to drop out of college in order to take care of his mom. And I know, Pete, I know you certainly started taking care of your mother full time pretty early on in your life. My journey started with my mom basically in my mid 40s. So back 2016, 2017 is when I had to start taking care of both of my parents. And and that obviously that comes sometimes with difficulties, because again, one, you're already dealing with the idea that you sometimes feel, and then this is a legitimate feeling, that sometimes you may feel stunted sometimes in terms of, because you have dreams, you have aspirations, you have things that you want to do, but then duty oftentimes calls you to, certainly to care for your parents. And, so sometimes those dreams and ambitions that you might have had, sometimes they get deferred. And so what do you do with that? So you're dealing with those emotions. But I think tonight's show, I know, Pete, you want to kind of, take this little to put a different twist on it. What if you're in a situation where you're not necessarily on best terms with your parents? What about, your duties, your obligations and whatnot? And we're also going to talk about just cultures of senior care in general, like across the world. There's different views and attitudes when it comes to that. That's certainly different than here in the U.S. And certainly I'll bring up some things to highlight some of that. But Peter, take this on in terms of, what was the thrust of your mindset when it came to this particular topic. And
I've been talking
to
to
take the conversation.
I've been talking to a lot of people lately, and I'm getting a lot of praise for what I do, and don't need praise, don't need a reward, I don't need a medal, I don't do nothing. This is what I do. I believe I put, excuse me, I believe I've been put on this earth to make a difference, and maybe that's through my mother, maybe through these episodes we do, through my food at work, whatever the case, it doesn't matter. So, and I've been realizing a lot of people don't have a great relationship with their parents.
No, you're right. We've had shows on that. We've talked about family dysfunction and how you got siblings that haven't talking for years. And in fact, we even had a show, I think last week, we had, I think Alexis from Texas was here, and she was talking about how she's not on good best terms with her parents, and these, so yeah, it's definitely, it's a widening problem for a lot of different reasons. There's generational divides, generational gaps, and whatnot. But yeah, we've had shows in the past on how people, just families are fighting, and just the level of separation that's causing a lot of disunity. So yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with that.
And more I talk to people, like some of you haven't spoke to their parents in years. I'm not talking like 4 or 5 years. I'm talking like 10, 20, even 30 years. And when they do pass, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know you took it a lot better than I expect you took it when your mom passed.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember the text, and we just had a show the night, a week before.
Yeah.
And I got that text. I'm like, oh, and I called you immediately, and you were fine.
Yeah.
But when I see people who don't have a great relationship with their parents, it could have been abuse, it could have been
abandonment. Yeah.
It could have been even molestation. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Any of those three, or even using them for money. Great example. I knew one kid hasn't spoke to his parents for about 10 years because they were using him as a trump card to get more money from the government. When I heard that, I'm like, oh, you got to be serious. And they flipped out when he says he's moving out. Oh, you're taking money away from us. Like, but eventually everybody has to spread their wings and fly. I don't know why I'm doing hand motions tonight. But, and I'm thinking, like, this is a good topic of the area.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something we spoke on the good side of it so far. But we haven't broke down the bad side of it.
Well, like I said, I do recall we did do a show just generally how, again, there's a lot of family relationships, and certainly for that panel that was on that night, or on the nights that we've had it, very transparent. My man Eric, shout out to Eric. Yeah, I remember we were in high school together, so we go back 40 years, and certainly his old man, good man at heart, but he was a gruff. He was a tough guy. And certainly seeing the interaction between my man and his father, certainly could get uncomfortable at times. But certainly Eric did his due diligence, and he made sure that both his father and mother were certainly cared for. But yeah, it's not easy when you have these strained relationships, or these relationships where if you haven't seen somebody for years or haven't spoken to years, then all of a sudden a situation comes up and it's like, oh, well, are you then?
I'll give you an example, Paul.
Yeah,
I'll give you an example. Remember my cousin I told you I don't speak to?
Yeah,
we're not speaking
right.
to. Okay, so years ago, before his mother died, when his father first passed, his mother was against, and I do apologize whoever I offend out there right now. My aunt was really racist, to be honest, you guys. So she was against him dating a Puerto Rican woman, and so that's it. He was like, no, you're gonna pick her, or she goes, so you gotta pick one or the other. They weren't talking for 4 or 5 years. But when he, ended that relationship, they were back together. Oh, like nothing happened. And personally, I don't understand that. What does it matter who you pick? Why would you stop talking to your son over that? I don't understand that. To this day, it's been over 20 years, and I still don't understand that.
Right.
Like your daughter, for example. You have 3 daughters. Let's say she picks a gentleman that you don't agree with personally. Are you going to stop speaking to her for that reason?
I wouldn't stop speaking. No. Now, would I bless the relationship? That's it. So a lot of it
That's a
would
different
be
story, of course.
right. But again, a lot of it would be on her whether or not she wanted to continue the relationship with us. I mean, you're still my child, and so I'll always be your father.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of a situation unless she did something that was so egregious and direct towards us that I would not want to have a relationship with her. But certainly I still think that certainly at least until she gets married, that certainly I'm recovering. And so even she dated someone in fact, she has dated some guys who I was like, I wouldn't say I disapproved in terms of a sort of thing like, uh, that I had something against them personally. It was more so their position because I thought some of the guys that she was dealing with, yes, they were, certainly they appreciated who she was. But I think these guys, I thought they needed to do some work for their own sake, that they need to upscale. He had one guy this guy had like a full ride scholarship, a smart guy, but he dropped out and he just sort of unmotivated. So the intelligence was there, but he didn't really have the will, the go to, the hustle to really improve his lot. And he's got works odd jobs. He's kind of struggling to find money and those sort of things. And it was so I felt bad for him.
Mm-hmm.
More so than anything. It's like, look, and I told my daughter, it's like, look, if he ever wants to talk to me, because I know he has a strained relationship with his father, and that dynamic isn't good. I said, look, if he ever wants to talk to me about anything, yeah, I mean, I'll certainly make time for him if he wants it. Like I said, I don't have anything personal against him. But as far as if you want to say, okay, look, I want to date the guy, or I want to be with this guy, whatever, like, nah, I think you could do better, because he needs to do some internal work. And again, it shouldn't be because he wants to be with you. If someone's going to date you and change because they want to be with you, I don't think that's necessarily a good motivation. I think you need to have a certain level of self-startedness, a go-to-itiveness that you should want to change for your own sake and improve your life, versus, oh well, if I don't change, I'll lose her. Well, I think I think you're setting yourself up for failure there. So that's more so than anything. But I can't see to the point where I would break off a relationship with it. Now I kind of kid my daughters a little bit, because again, I come from a very pro-black background. So it's like, yeah, man, I want you better date brothers, man. Don't be bringing. So I kind of kid with them like that. But if they did, my thing is this: marry who you love and marry who loves you. I mean, if my son-in-law was going to be white or Greek or anything else, but if I had a preference, just full disclosure, yeah, I mean, I like seeing black people get married. I still believe in black marriage. I still want black babies. I still want, that just to continue that. So I have my preferences there. But again, if she came home with an Indian, Asian, whatever it was, as long as he treated her right or whatnot, I couldn't deny that. My faith won't allow me to disavow that. So, but I do know that certainly, even you talk about just the race, but it's even classism. Because again, I know I come from an IT background. So again, I know a lot of Asian Indians, and I've seen the caste system up close. So you can talk about the same people ethnically, but because you belong to a different caste, if you marry outside that caste, they basically ghost you. You know what I mean? At least until the children come. Now, I have seen that situation where, okay, once you get kids and grandkids in, grandparents are like, well, I want to see my grandkids, so I guess I have to accept it. But up to that point,
Give
they
you a
were
better
like, tooth
example.
and nail. Yeah.
Remember I mentioned on the show, and to you, I dated an Indian woman for a little bit, and she was married once before she met me.
Mm-hmm.
So her first marriage was a Italian guy. So her mother was very hardcore, saying she didn't accept anybody that was not Indian in her family, in her life. And there was Guyanese Indian, so let's get it clear out there.
Yeah.
So, and I'm listening to the story. Like, I know her mom has passed, unfortunately, and I'm listening to the story. I'm like, if your mother found out I was Greek and she was still around, she probably chased me down with a goddamn axe or a machete, because I didn't fit that sauna.
Mm-hmm.
Another good example. I remember bringing my first girlfriend around to my mother.
Mhm.
And my mom accepted her.
Mhm.
She was not Greek. She was not white. She was not Latino. She was a black woman.
Mhm.
My mom didn't give a shit what color skin she was or her background, none of that
Mhm.
shit. She goes,
Yeah.
"Well, you treat my son good. He's happy. And you don't give me any bastard kids." She goes, "I'm good. Make sure you wrap that shit up." Yeah, and
He said,
you
knowing
expect
your
that.
mom, she would say exactly that.
That's my point. And so I didn't, it was like, okay. I grew up in a school district in New York that was 50%, I can't say that, about 48% Latinos, for about other 48% blacks, and was 1 or 2%, whites.
Mm-hmm.
So walking down the hallways, I was like, head turner. I'm like, what he's doing here? I'm like, then I was like, remember I said I was a black sheep growing up?
Yeah.
I was a black wolf going to that school. They're like,
Yeah.
and I was cool with it. Like, I think that, me going through that background made me the man I am.
Yeah.
So I don't believe, like I said, I don't believe in racism. I don't believe in, I do see, different people, what I'm saying,
Mhm.
but I don't see the color, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
I know we had that conversation before.
Yeah.
And from that conversation, I kind of turned my mindset a little different now.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
I know you come from different ethnicity, but I don't see the color, if that makes sense.
Right. Right.
So I don't understand that to this day. I'm like, I'm a Christian on heart. Like, I wear my cross. I don't ever take this off.
Mhm.
I have it. It's on this. Where is it? Oh, here it is. I have it. I don't know if you can see it. My tattoo.
Yep.
My cross tattoo.
Mhm.
So my Christianity is like 101. Like, this one thing about us, our Christianity people, is you're not supposed to judge. You're not supposed to be racist. All of that stuff.
Mhm.
I'm not quoting the Bible to a T.
Mhm.
But I don't care what priest you bring in, Catholic, Baptist, Orthodox, they're all going to tell you the same thing. You're not supposed to be racist. And when I see racism
Mhm.
in his own family, because, oh, you married a Latino, you married a black, you married an Italian, that's it, you're done.
Mhm.
I don't understand that. It kind of bothers me in a way.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and again, those kind of wedges, like I said, certainly divide families. Families don't talk, but like I said, a lot of times I'll see some of the ice will melt. Sometimes when children come, then I've seen some of the ice will break in that situation. But yeah, I mean, but when it comes down to later on, and this is also something that I'm always mindful of, is this something that at the end, when you talk about end of life events, or when you talk about the things that matter, is this particular thing, is it going to matter in 20 or 30 years? Shout out to my man Lost in Translation in the house tonight. Again, appreciate you being here, brother. Is this going to matter? And we've talked about this on relationship shows, like when couples fight over issues. At the end of the day, is this going to matter 10 years from now? Is it going to matter 20 years from now? If not, then why are you dragging this out? And so sometimes time is oftentimes one of the better teachers in terms of giving you focus on what's important. Like I said, when I went to the concert the other night and I saw I was kind of faced with my demographic as far as where most people are. Now, again, I am, my wife and I were kind of exceptional within our demographic, in part because we certainly taken measures to take care of ourselves better so we can function better within our demographic. But we were kind of face to face with that demographic, and we're like, wow, so we have to make sure we stay on top of things. And then even like for example, when I was sitting down, right? So again, people were getting up, women were getting up and having to go out and bathroom and all that kind of stuff. And I was getting up, and because again, they can't scoot past me because I'm tall, so my knees are basically hitting the next row that's in front of me. So I have to get up each time. So there was like 3 or 4 times where I had to get up and into the aisle, because I typically sit on the aisle seat, and get up to let the ladies out. Now, again, in my younger time, that would have annoyed me. But my thing is the fact that I'm at my age and I still have full function where I can get up and down without pain and have full function to do and move and have my being and do mostly. Look, I'm not going to run a 100-meter dash without practice, at least. but I have, I can do 90% of what I wanted to do functioning and again without a pain. So again, you recognize that again, a lot of things that families, that siblings talk about. I mean, my daughters had beef this weekend. They at some point, fights were breaking out, and it certainly is getting me to realize that hey, maybe the house is getting a little bit too small for us all to live together. You know what I'm saying? I got a lot of estrogen up in here. And so when it comes down to it, yeah, but at the end of the day, you take time down the road. Is it really going to matter at the end of the day? But when it comes to this parental care, when you are older, again, if those wounds, if those situations haven't been healed, that they haven't been addressed, and now you're in a situation where your parent is in need of care, that they cannot no longer live on their own. What do you do in that situation? And that's a tough call. I can't answer that for anybody. I've known people who certainly stepped up and certainly did their quote unquote duty, and a lot of that duty might be based on the culture that they come from. A lot of it may be based on their religious faith. As Christians, we say you honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God gives you. So, some people go off of that edict. It didn't say you had to like your parents. It just said that you had to honor them, and that, certainly, that there's a charge for you to take care of them in their old age. But again, some people, depending on the level of dysfunction, the level of trauma, the level of abuse, and all those things that you started out the show with, it's hard. Now, some people are hard on them, but you should take care of your parents no matter what. But I recognize that that's difficult for a lot of people. So my thing is, if you really want to create a situation and an environment where this sort of care can be given and can have some sort of relationship, then I think you need to work on that relationship and work on those hurt places that were never addressed. I think that would be a good way forward for a lot of people. But to expect someone, you haven't talked to your parents in 10 years. Now they're older. Now they need you or whatever. And you're just going to, come up. Again, I salute to those who are able to do it. I would not say, oh, you stupid for doing that. You shouldn't. You haven't talked to them in 10 years. They did that to you. Why'd you go back and do it? I would never say that. But I can certainly understand one's trepidation if, in fact, they had or brought up, to this situation where this may have to be something that they may have to deal with. And unfortunately, some people do walk away from that relationship. So again, from the scriptures, 4th commandment, it's certainly there. But depending on the level of pain, what if you were abused? Or what if they did run away or abandon you or did something heinous to you? Do you have an obligation to take care of them? That's a tough call. That I don't know. Like I said, I can't make that for someone. But I can certainly give some guidance just based on my own experience in terms of what I did to help me do that. Because again, there was a lot of things. Again, my mom, again, she was a paranoid schizophrenic since I was born. She had mental illness battles her whole, I would say not her whole life, because my older siblings, they remember a time when she was well, but she became unwell. And by the time I came around, she was definitely in the unwell. And I grew up with that. And there was a lot of trauma that came with that, that I, for a long time, I didn't necessarily deal with. But I was able to fashion a framework that I was able to work in order to do the task. Mm-hmm. And that really was, a difference. And I can talk about that later in the show, but I want to get your perspective in terms of, because, obviously you've had to take care of my since you were pretty young. And so talk about that what that was like, and especially, and your mom, again, I love her, but, she can be a difficult person. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat that either. So you
Oh,
can
I
take
know
that
you
on.
had your first drink
You
tonight.
could you
I
could
know
you
you
could
had
take
your first drink tonight.
you could take that on however you want to, but certainly,
Difficult is
but yeah,
understatement.
yeah,
She's a rough on the edge, let's put it this way. There are times that I question why I do what I do because she doesn't make it easy. This great example. I went to church today, did my thing, then I went down I stayed for coffee hour for an hour. I was BSing with somebody, and I actually want to bring that story into this in a minute. Actually, it's
okay,
funny how
okay,
the schedule and the conversation we're having today. And he goes to me, she goes, her sugar's drop. I'm giving her a piece of little candy to get right because sugar was down to 75. She
yeah,
goes, I don't want that. You know what I'm fucking doing? I'm like, I'm getting screwed that. And she's shaking like a leaf. I'm like, I can't fucking win some days.
mm-hmm.
I can't fucking win with her some days.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if I tell her to do X, Y, and Z or BAC. I can't fucking win with her some days, dude.
Yeah,
Some days she's very aggressive and pretty nasty at times.
yeah,
And sometimes she's the sweetest woman in the world. Like,
yeah.
for example, if she knew you're coming over tomorrow, argument's sakes, right?
Mm.
She would make sure she had food and everything. She'd be the sweetest person. And then when she, when you leave, like, the devil comes down, like, I'm like,
Jekyll and Hyde. Yeah, I grew up with the same
literally.
thing. Like I said, when my mom was good, everybody had nothing but glowing things to say about her. She really was a gentle-hearted, caring person, and you saw that. You saw flashes of that, but then you also saw the demons that she was battling. I mean, and like literally, you could see it on her face. It was almost like she was having a conversation with another person. I mean, it was kind of freaky because I was just thinking about that a few days ago. How I remember those internal battles that she would have. You just be looking at her in the kitchen or doing something, and you could tell like there was a conversation she was having in her head. So there was really, but it took me time to recognize that. Because back then, you didn't have a lot of people getting diagnosed. And also, what's that?
If any guy diagnosed back then.
Right. But then also you have the situation where, again, if you did want that, then the person would have to take that on voluntarily. Unless there was a situation where there was violence. So the only time you would get institutions involved, there had to be some sort of violence. The person had to prove to be harmful to themselves or harmful to other people. And that was really how she was able to get into the system and try to get some sort of level of care that she needed. But, you can't just say, okay, look, my mom's acting crazy or whatever. I think she needs to be looked at. Hey, can someone take her in? You can't necessarily do that either. So again, it was traumatic, but I get sometimes you went to school and you didn't know who you were coming home to. Sometimes you went in, she was good and everything was great. And then sometimes you went home and she was like, where you been? What you been doing? No, you've been with so-and-so. It's like, what are you talking about? I just came here from school. And she just had these wild stories about what I was doing or where I was and who I was involved with and all these things. And, it was just like, so it was tense a lot of times when I had to go home and see how she, and see how she was going to interact, and a lot of it depend on how the day was going, how stressful her job, if she had a job, because she bounced from job to job, certainly back then growing up. So you just didn't know who you were coming home to. And it was, like I said, it was just a very tense feeling being around that. And sometimes, she would take it out on me. So I would be accused of something I didn't do and I would get a beating for that. It's just that kind of thing that, that really festered until I got to a point where my dad came back into my life. So you're talking about 13, 14 years old. So I moved to Highland Park and that's where I meet Eric. And, so that's that, that situation. And even then my mom and dad, they tried to do a reconcile like a few years in. But again, none of them really dealt with their issues. And that became disastrous. And again, seeing that up close. So when you're exposed to those kind of things, it really, you start to question. It's like, why am I, but again, I think the fact that you were in a caregiver's role, like I said, I didn't become a caregiver until, like I said, about 10 years ago. You were there early on. So, but talk a little bit about sort of that dreams deferred, or the things that, what were you thinking about doing with your life that you realized that you come to find out that, maybe I can't do or be the person I want to be because of, my situation with her. So talk about that sense of, frustration or loss you might have felt in those times.
Where do I start with that one? So I always wanted to do things in my life. And I've been bouncing ideas all since young age. Like things I was into. Because you know that they're saying, if you love something, you never work a day in your life, right?
Yeah.
So being a cook wasn't like the dream for me as people think it is. I'm good at it. Don't get me wrong. I'm right fucking good at it. But it wasn't my ultimate dream. Cars got into that, but I wasn't making enough money to support my parents. So I had to switch careers really fast.
Yeah.
I was thinking about going back to school several times, get into gaming designing, something how much I love gaming, bro. Like, can you see me as a game designer?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, or something in IT, but everything I wanted to do is time away from me, take care of my mom, or working less because you got to go back to school. Can't do neither of those. Like, I want to be a father and a husband one day so bad.
Yeah.
Me going out and meeting somebody is taken away from me, take care of her. So I'm not saying I have to put that in a back burner, but it's not a major priority to actually put myself as much out there. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, for sure.
You have to put everything you ever want to on second. Hanging out with friends. Sometimes I want to go out and have a beer with somebody or chill or go, shoot some pool, bowling, whatever. Nope. I got to put it on the back burner because I need a job that works around her medical stuff.
Correct.
And most times that means I have to work nights, afternoons technically. So I can be at work later on than earlier. Again, sacrifice there.
Yeah.
I have made multiple sacrifices. Even women I date sometimes, a lot of women don't understand why I do what I do. And I hate when they come up with this. Like, you know what? You got to pick your mother or me. And I don't think that's a fair thing to say. Pick one or the other. I never thought that was fair. It is what it is, bro. And I deal with it the best I can. It's just not something that I want anybody to go through it, to be honest with you. Like, if you just say you couldn't afford to put your mom in a home and you have to take care of her have her live with you, you think your relationship with your wife would be the same today?
Probably not. Well, that's a good question. Because obviously that was an option. I wouldn't say it was a reasonable option, just given the logistics of our situations. Again, because it got to a point where my mom, she required 24/7 care. Because again, she was in a situation where she had a living situation where she had a home health aide that would come in from 9 to 2 every day. And the problem was after 2 p.m., there was really nobody there to really monitor and make sure that she took her insulin. She had diabetes, so making sure she took her insulin on time and made sure that, her meds were in and whatnot. And that was just something that neither of us was in position to do. And there was a similar situation with her mom as well, where there were just certain people, there were certain individuals who were just in a better position to handle that particular situation. Now, again, that was fortunately one of her sisters is an RN. And so certainly she was able to create a situation where the mother was still able to live at home and be in a situation where, again, there were people in the house where she could be supported. And we're going to talk about that in terms of, again, how different people, different systems that people use in terms of this parental care. But yeah, to bring that into your home, I would say only unless it was something that she saw sort of like from day one. And she was certainly willing to stay with me. But even then, I mean, the strain that can cause on a relationship. Because and then add to that we have kids that we're trying to raise. So again, keep in mind that we have to also create an environment that's protective of them, because we don't want them necessarily exposed to some of the trauma that was that she would sometimes show and exhibit. But again, my kids started to see it because my mom did get to a certain level of functionality. So she was in a program, she was good for many years, and it was safe enough to where certainly we would allow our children to stay, spend the night with her. But she was very good, very devoted. When she was right, she was like the best caregiver that was out there, but I remember my daughters coming to me and telling me, and this might have been maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, maybe 10 years old. And they were starting to tell me that, what's wrong with grandma? Grandma's not, there were some things that were off. So you kind of start to see some slippage in terms of, now again, they were never endangered, but they would just see things. Again, I talked earlier about that internal battle that she was having in her mind that they started to show. So part of the calculus also was, well, do I want my daughters exposed to this, or having to live with this situations, which made, again, the idea that staying in a nursing home that was very close to us. I mean, the nursing home was about 10-minute drive. It's in the same town. I also have other siblings that are nearby, so certainly it wasn't something where we just kind of shipped her off somewhere. Certainly we were interacting weekly with her. At some point, she had some sort of touch point or something weekly, in addition to the services offered by the nursing home. But it was definitely, but yeah, that certainly would not have worked, just given her level of dysfunction. And I remember even growing up, we were basically very nomadic, because after my parents split, and my mom, she took me and some of the other siblings, whatnot, and we all kind of got split up. So, long story short, my other siblings lived with either my dad or other relatives for a number of years before ultimately they all started living with my dad. And I stayed with my mom the whole time. But I remember there were situations where we would live with different people, different friends that she had, who basically would take us in because of, and this is an important part of the story, my parents were very instrumental in helping a lot of people. My parents are from the South, from Georgia, and they did a lot when my dad came out of the military. He got a FHA loan, bought a big house in New Jersey, and he helped a lot of my relatives get established. So they came up from the South, lived with my parents until they got jobs. They got jobs at the GM plants, at the Ford plants. Certainly my man Anton, I'm sure he's familiar with those in Edison. A lot of those people got jobs established because of my parents. And so when it came down to when my mom was needing a place to stay, a lot of them was like, oh, sure, come on, live with us. Because, again, they remembered how good my parents were to them. And when in those good times, I guess in the late 50s into the mid 60s. But her dysfunction, which, like I said, went for years undiagnosed, it created a situation where it was causing strain on those families. And then they would have to say, oh, you have to go. And so my mom and I went from place to place to place. Oftentimes we had to live in motels. So again, my man Anton, if you're familiar with Route 1, in Edison, in Rahway, in Elizabeth, in Linden, a lot of those motels on Route 1, that was where I lived for many years. And it would get to a point where even the motels would throw us out because obviously they didn't get paid. So certainly, like I said, it was a constant situation. Yes. Ford Assembly Plant in Linden. Yes. GM had a plant in Edison. Yeah. So again, my parents helped many of my family members and friends of theirs get set up in those companies when they came up from the South. So they were kind of like that middle passage for a lot of people. And so my mom was able to call in a lot of favors. But again, even those ran out. And so for her to come live with us, given the situation that she was in, and now you're also starting to take into account the physical health starting to fail. So she already had the mental health, which was, managed, but not necessarily curable because it wasn't curable. There's no cure for schizophrenia in it. And then you start to have her health issues, which required 24/7 attention. And so for those reasons, also, we made the decision, it's probably better off that she's in a place that's close and that we can certainly
monitor her from far away.
Correct. And like I said, I would stop in a lot of times just on my way home from work. It was easy. I get off Route 287 and boom, it's right there. So it wasn't something that was had to go out of my way to go and see her. It was necessarily inconvenient. But yeah, I mean, so again, that situation where you have to live with it, it's different. And anybody who deals with anybody who has mental health issues, it can be a very tense and difficult situation, because again, you have to make sure that the person is not a danger to themselves, and sometimes or danger to other people in the house, either doing something haphazardly or mishap or something to that effect. And so, you always have to, you always have to be mindful of that. So,
you know what makes me wonder with the story all the time? And I hear this all the time. And please, maybe as a married older gentleman who raised 3 daughters, maybe you can put some lightning on this because I don't understand. I hear it all the time from women. Oh, you take care of your mom. You're so sweet, man. You have to be a good man. And when you start dating them, oh, I can't do this. They're out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not asking you to take care of it. I'm doing the whole work. I just have you as my support. Meaning, like, if I have a bad day, I can have a cover. Let me vent.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It comes from selfish. It's coming from a selfish age, because I think when they say that, I think what they're ultimately saying is, he takes care of his mom, meaning he may be good for my mom. Because they got no problem when it's their mom who's going to be in need of care. So I need to get with somebody. So when my mom needs care, then I got a guy who's going to, the fact he's exhibiting these qualities, he could then step in the gap. But if I got to deal with his mom, now it's not reciprocal. This is not a reciprocal situation a lot of times, where it's like, okay, if it's my mom, it's good. But if it's your mom, it's a problem. And I've seen couples break up over that. Where when it comes to care for mom, it's one thing, but then the guy argues, it's like, but when it was with your mom and she had to live with us, you had no problem with your mom living with us, but then I'm asking my mom, she has to live with us, and you're saying no, because her and the mom don't get along. So again, it's always coming from this selfish place.
It's funny you bring this up. I have mentioned my ex-fiance multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
One of the arguments was, like I said earlier, is she wanted me to put her in a home. I never did that. But when it came to her fucking parents, she got on her first plane back to DR and go take care of business.
Mm-hmm.
Never pushed back.
Yep.
I said, babe, whatever you need, I'm here. I'm one phone call away. If I need to leave an absence of work, I'll be on this next plane out. Even I had her mom downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
I'll figure it out. That was always okay. But when it came to, hey, I need to pick up an extra shift because we're going to be short on rent. Can you take her to her appointment on Friday or Monday, Tuesday, or whatever? Mm-hmm. She goes, oh, no, I can't do that. I'm working.
Mm-hmm.
But you want the guy who makes 3 times more money than you do, who pays all the bills in this house,
mm-hmm.
to take off,
mm-hmm.
and you not take her
mm-hmm.
because you're only making about minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
That makes no fucking sense.
Well, yeah, it does. It's like I said, it's just selfish. Again,
that part. No, that part.
People in general look out for their own selfish interests. Yeah, I mean, so again, it doesn't surprise me that kind of attitude. That's why, again, for you and your situation, for a woman to come into that situation, that's a requirement for you, which is probably going to limit your dating pool in terms of who can fit in it. Which is why I'm always saying, if you have someone who basically does everything else, sometimes the best option is the option that's in front of you. So I'm just saying that, we don't, you want the sort of the ideal and perfect situation. Sometimes, you have to make a strategic calculation. So anybody who comes into your life is willing to take you and your mother on, because she realizes it's a package deal.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's going to be that, just like if I was going, like a lot of, especially nowadays, you have a lot of single women, single black women live with their mothers. They're a duo. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to date you, I don't say I don't date your mom, but mom's going to be in the picture sometimes more than I can maybe comfortable. But I got to see if I want to embrace that or not. Oh, we get married, mom's living with us. Now I'm free to say no to that. But if I decide to take this on, then that goes with the territory. See, so again, not everyone's in the best situation to, get something that's ideal.
Most Greek family, it doesn't matter what side of Paris, hers or his, a lot of them, they live together. And I've seen even times that they have a 3 stories house, one parent live upstairs,
the multi-generational home.
And then, I don't know what it's called.
Yeah, multi-generational.
And make it work.
Yeah. Shout out to Anti. So this is what I'm talking about. So again, he helped his wife care for her mother before he got married. She died of AIDS. Sorry to hear that. On Christmas Day 2008, my wife and I got married in 2009. So here's a guy who's been married certainly over 15 plus years. Multiple kids, stable family situation. But again, that is something that, again, if you find someone like that, you better hold on to them. They may not check all the boxes, but if they check there's certain boxes that are more important than others. Not all boxes are the same. And if you find someone who can give you that to be a helpmate to you, all the other stuff, beauty's gonna fade and all those kind of things down the line. But someone who has the heart for that, those are situations that you need to value that person who's willing to take that on. But if you want all that and she has to be a 10 or he has to be a 10 also, people, you got to be mindful about what's available to you based on your situation. But yeah, for sure, it's definitely something that you have to be mindful of when you're going into a dating situation. What is truly involved? Because again, you are marrying into a family, and understanding that family dynamic and whether or not you can handle that family dynamic or not is also going to be very important to the situation. But I want to pivot a little bit and just again, just share some information. So I found an article from This Week. It's an online publication, thisweek.com. And I found it interesting where they talk about how the elderly are treated around the world. In countries like Korea and China, you can expect to be taken care of by your family. But in England and America, not so much. So you have here, certainly in Korea, again, not only do Koreans respect the elderly, but they also celebrate them for Koreans to 60th and 70th birthdays or prominent life events, which are commemorated with the large-scale family parties and feasts. As in Chinese culture, the universal expectation in Korea is that the roles reverse once a parent's age, and that is an adult child's duty, and an honorable one at that, to care for their parents. So this is something that I've always known, and I'm sure this is also a similar situation with the Asian Indians as well that I've seen it.
I think in publicly, everybody knows about that. I think at this point.
Yeah. In Japan, now again, we've talked about this also, that Japan has an aging problem. So again, like the Chinese and Koreans, the Japanese prize filial piety and expect the children to be dutiful to their parents. But Japan is also facing a unique problem, tending to an increasing elderly population. Again, a lot of Japanese are not getting married and they're not having children. Okay, we also did a gray area show on that. Go back and look it up in terms of people opting out of having it. 7.2% of Japanese population will be 80 or older in 2020 compared to 4.1% in the U.S., which will likely lead to a new host of problems for the country. Adult diapers are already outselling baby diapers. Wow. And their pension system is on course to dry up. So we even talked about Medicare and all the Social Security, net in this country, how it's expected to age out. Because again, all those baby boomers, when they came back from World War II, they had all them babies. Those babies are aging out. And then in the U.S., just as it is in a lot of developed nations, you're not having your 2.1 children to make sure that there's enough in the system to take care of those seniors that came before you. So again, Japan definitely has that issue. And this article was from a few years ago. So again, probably the issue is even greater at this point, unless they put some incentives in to encourage people to marry and to have children. But that's becoming an issue. So again, in the U.S. and U.K., Protestant, I found it interesting, the title Protestantism at Play. Western cultures tend to be youth-centric, emphasizing attributes like individualism and independence. This relates back to the Protestant work ethic, which ties to an individual to value his or her ability to work, something that diminishes with old age. Now, I find this interesting. They talk about Protestant, which is a branch of Christianity. I find this interesting because, as we said earlier, you have the fourth commandment, you have the tenets of Jesus, you have the tenets of Paul. It says one who doesn't take care of his family, especially his immediate family, is worse than an infidel. So again, so there is plenty of defense in Scripture, Old Testament and New Testament, that children should take care of their parents when it's time. But this Protestant work ethic, which has somehow been lifted up as a virtue, that seems to diminish one's responsibilities to care for their parents. Anthropologist Jared Diamond, who has studied the treatment of the elderly across countries, has said that the geriatric in countries like the U.S. and UK live lonely lives, separated from their children and lifelong friends. As their health deteriorates, the elderly in these cultures oftentimes move to retirement communities, assisted living, and nursing homes. Now, again, I described my specific situation and why, but there is somewhat of a disconnect where we'd rather peddle our, so this may be a cultural issue for those in certainly in the U.S. and UK, where we still want sort of our lives, but again, in these other cultures, care for the seniors is not a question, regardless of what your relationship with them is. But then again, given the culture, maybe some of the dysfunction isn't there the way it is in the U.S. The fact that you have a lot of people who are youth-centric or individualistic and be very selfish. They're selfish in terms of putting their needs over their children. And then it's no surprise then that when it comes that time, now your children put their needs over yours. There's an old song out called Cats in the Cradle that kind of talks about this sort of thing, where the parent never had time for the kids. And now when the parent gets old and now the kid has a life, now the kid doesn't have time for the parent. And so, so this kind of thing, this could be a more, bless you, this could be a more U.S. European or certainly UK model that came, unfortunately, out of Protestantism. But again, I find that disfortunate because, especially since the Bible talks so much about valuing the elderly and making sure that they're cared for. In France, they have a different system here. So again, parents are also protected by law. It is difficult to imagine an elderly rights law being legislative priority in many Western cultures. France did this, passed a similar decree in 2004. Requiring its citizens to keep in touch with their geriatric parents. It was only enacted following two disturbing events, though. One was the publication of statistics revealing that France had the highest rate of pensioner suicides in Europe, and the other was after the aftermath of a heat wave that killed 15,000 people, most of them elderly, and many of whom had been dead for weeks before they were found. So this is people not even keeping up with their parents enough to even recognize, even during a situation like that they were being they weren't being looked after. And so France by law put this into effect in 2004. It could be criminal if you don't certainly look in certainly for your parents. Now again, Mediterranean and Western Latin cultures, again, not surprising here. Mediterranean, which I would think of it including Greek, and Latin cultures.
I'm shaking my head because you put they put my big fat Greek wedding in there.
In both cultures, it's commonplace, as you just described before I brought this up. So it's a perfect segue. It's commonplace for multiple generations to live under one roof. You talk about the three-story house. my big, like in big Greek weddings, sharing a home and all the duties that come in maintaining one. In the contemporary iteration of this living arrangement, the oldest generation is often relied on to assist with the caring of the youngest, while the breadwinners labor outside the home. As such, the age remained thoroughly integrated well into their last days. And I still think to this day, if you can pull it off, because again, I think you certainly have to have the space for or just the willingness to do that. But I certainly see that. I live in a community where there's a lot of Latino families, and certainly that multi-generational support that allows people to go out and thrive. This is certainly something that we can certainly, especially in the Black community, we could certainly lean on. But again, because of our own individualism, that is taught as an American virtue. So again, everyone talks about America and capitalism and the rugged individualism that the country teaches. It comes with a cost. Now, you add to that the dysfunction in families, and now you're going to have this situation where, again, just put mom and dad into a nursing home and leave them there. And so again, you get, sometimes we get what we pay for when we, prioritize, the individual over the collective. But again, you hear that a lot in many spaces, certainly on the internet, where that sense of community is not there.
So we talked about it. You had mentioned the Bible at one point. How you're supposed to take care of your elders when they get older. Are you surprised we're not doing that in this country? The direction we're going? Let's call a spade from in here, guys. So the country is going literally nosediving right now. So the way things are going, are we surprised we're not taking care of our elders? I'm not.
Yeah,
tell me.
Yeah, like I said, it's weird for me because, like I said,
relationship with them.
The Protestantism, which is a major, we all know Protestantism was a major break off from the Catholic Church. There've been different schisms throughout time, the Protestant Reformation, and all these things, which was supposed to bring about a greater sense of clarity and purity to the scriptures, and not so much the religiosity that was tied to it. That it bred this kind of mindset of, again, the individual being all important. Now, it's not to say that the individual is not important, but again, this idea of individualism apart from a collective. Everybody just wants to do them. And again, I've seen it even in my family. Sometimes I kind of see it fester sometimes in my daughters and whatnot. It's like, hey, we all got to live under this roof. We're all grown people here now. And my wife and I, we always said, like, well, look, we have to have some conversations soon once a lot of stuff dies down. How are we going to live in this house and how we're going to respect one another for the time being until, so like I said, I got one going to medical school in August. And certainly there's just some little bickerings that are going on that we're going to have to manage if this situation is going to work. And so yeah. So I think the culture certainly coming out of this Protestant work ethic has certainly separated us from the sense of this collective. But again, the collective is also informed by, again, how the older treat the younger. Again, in those Mediterranean cultures that was talked about, the older take care of the younger. So again, if you had a lot of crazy dysfunction and things of that nature and abuse and whatnot, those cultures couldn't exist. So we have to ask ourselves, is there something about this American culture or UK culture or these Western cultures that has done much to break us away from this collective?
I think so. I think the culture has a lot to do with it, Paul.
Yeah. I think it comes with pluses and minuses, because having said that, a lot of those cultures that we're talking about, the trade-off is that, again, a lot of them were very tribal. So again, you talked about earlier how you have relatives in your family who didn't want folks dating out, or people who you dated where they would get ostracized for dating out. That's also a part of it. It's like, look, we have to keep this community together. So that means even those who look like us, we a tribe here. And with that tribe comes values and structures and whatnot, and including who you marry. But now we want to be an individual. Everybody can date whoever they want. Everybody can marry whoever they want. But with that individuality, are you then going to be tied or connected to something or someone? Can you expect someone who is in, if you have, let's say, a longstanding Greek tradition, can you truly expect someone from outside that tradition to truly embrace it with the substance that you do?
Yes.
You can expect that, but I'm saying, but is it likely that they can fully understand and embrace as hard as you embrace?
I can give you a great example.
Go ahead.
Like today, we had a new member who joined the church. He was a African American guy, and he's embracing it 100%. He's getting baptized soon. He does the lamb. He does everything. So I don't expect everybody to fall into it. Like I mean, like, oh, I'm expecting you, like, hey, Pete, you know what? I'm gonna become Orthodox tomorrow. I'm gonna look at you like, are you on drugs? The first question I'm gonna ask you. So I don't expect everybody to do that. But this is what he wanted. I don't know the backstory, but whatever. But my point is trying to get to, like, not everybody can do it. There are a few out there who were willing to convert or go, believe it, in the what's called it, in the culture. Doesn't mean it's for everybody. Nothing that. I'll probably say if most people, it's probably only 5%, and I'm really pushing the number.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying the likelihood. Unless that person's very special, unless that person really has demonstrated, just as Anton was talking about, the things that he did. Not only did he care for the parents, again, there was some autistic children involved. I mean, again, he showed and proved that, yeah, I'm that dude. You can trust that I'm going to be here. I mean, your family's my family. Again, how many people are going to have that kind of dedication and commitment before you marry them? And that's what I'm saying. If you do find someone like that, that's a gem. You better wife that. If it's a woman like that, you better wife her up. Or if that's a dude, you better husband him up. Because again, those people are rare. I'm not saying it's not possible, but again, the likelihood of someone being able to embrace your culture fully, to bring someone from a different culture into your situation, is beautiful when it works, for sure. But is that like, because again, we just as human beings, we tend to kind of go with who we are more so familiar with, or the cultural milieu that we're in. So again, an American who has this sense of independence, they may look at, and it's interesting because I know that for children of immigrants that I know, I've talked about this several times on the show, where you have, again, Asian Indians and Africans, and they come in with this very tight knit culture, social network. But the children, because they grew up in America, you can see the change where they appreciate certain things about the cultures that they come from, but they've adopted a lot of American values. So back in their parents' day or even prior, your husband was like already picked out for you pretty much. And you were going to kind of do this. Now they're saying, no, I want to date and I want to marry. I want to do what I want to do. So they take the culture as they want it, not as a duty or a responsibility to the collective. And again, I remember that conversation I had at that table with those kids, 20, 21-year-old kids from Sierra Leone. I asked them about marriage. And they're not looking to get married anytime soon. I asked them what the average age typically of a woman from a Sierra Leone gets married. They said about age 26, 27. And I said, okay, so in 5 years, because there were a lot of them there, because a lot of these families. And I asked them, so in 5 years, there's going to be a ton of weddings. And they're like, I don't know. Because again, they're not bought in as their parents and the parents before them were bought in to that culture. And so because of that, so we can definitely see the impact of Protestantism, of this sort of American work ethic or Western culture work ethic at play, creating more individuals or a sense of individualism versus the overall collective. And so when we see this happening, no, it shouldn't surprise us. But it's very interesting to watch when you see it up close, how the dynamic, the change from one generation to the next. And again, and that's in cultures where things are healthy. Again, the thrust of the show tonight, for those who are coming in, we appreciate those who are certainly in the chat tonight. We're talking about that. We just talked about healthy situations. We're talking about, for the thrust of the show, what if the situation is unhealthy? What if you weren't on the best terms with your parents? What if there has been separation or strain, and now you're in a situation where your parents now need care? Are you going to be there in that time to take that on? Are you going to have the sense of duty and obligation to them by whatever means, whether it be your religious faith or a sense of your community or whatever that is? Now, again, I'm not going to minimize someone's pain. If you come from a traumatic situation and you had to leave, or either you were taken from your home because of a certain situation or whatever, I'm not going to stay here and tell you how to act in that particular situation. I'll share, like I said, I can share my story, how I was able to get past all that, that pain and hurt and stuff, and how I was able to deal with it. And if people can get inspired by that, by all means, they can do so. But I can't tell you how to manage that. So we have cultural values that are driving sort of this separation, especially for those in the United States. And then add on top of that, compounding that, is the family dysfunction that causes people to separate and not have that sense of self. But in these cultures and communities where, again, the Mediterranean, the Greek culture, the Latino cultures, the Asian cultures, these things are dealt with. And again, it really doesn't matter how you feel about how you were raised or whatever. These are expected in those cultures. How we turn that around here in the United States, that's to me, that's a gray area. That's a tough thing to answer and to address. But certainly looking at where things are going, being able, just through my own empirical observation, this is going to continue to worsen until people decide that, look, I want to do something different. So what's your thoughts on that, Pete?
You threw a lot there. How can we change it? The question is. You left out about we need to change it. But the question is how? When we're going on this down spiral, I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. And make us think that, like, maybe your girls are unique. But let's say I have kids one day and they say, screw you, dude. You raise us, we're on our own. You're on your own now, too. It makes you think, like, you have to worry about when you get older, what is going to happen to you. Because not everybody can afford have a nurse at home all the time or an aide or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of...
Yeah. So again, I can only point it to, again, the quality of your relationship. I mean, like I said, my wife and I at this point, what we're discovering, and like I said, this has been discovered literally over the past few days, where our work is again to try to ensure not only the health of the individuals, but also the health of the family, of the unit, of the tribe, to try to get people to work and fashion a way of working that everybody can embrace. It may not look like another culture or what have you. We just have to make it work. So, like, getting back to what I was talking about with my mom, how was I able to kind of step in? Because again, one, Nobody else was. Just in terms of just reality of I got 4 of the siblings. I'm the youngest of 5, and my brother's 6.5 years older than me. And it became pretty apparent early on that due to logistics, one being, for example, shout out to Mandrell in the building tonight, logistics. I got 2 sisters who live on the West Coast. So unless they were going to be willing to move back to the East Coast, that was going to be a problem. Then I had another sibling who had already kind of went through this with her husband's family. So again, she had a husband and had his mom. She needed care, and so she poured a lot of her life into making sure that his mom was cared for. And then she had to then compound that by her husband also was dealing with some illness at the same time. Unfortunately, he passed a few years ago. So she got to a point where it emptied her out. Everything she poured into the mom and losing her husband at the same time.
She was burned out. She was burned out.
Yes. So that wasn't an option. And then I have a brother who he just didn't have the capacity. And you have to be mindful of that. I talked about that on the plug show. You have to recognize not everyone's built for this stuff. And that's why I was telling you and David the other night. There's a reason why you're here. And some guys aren't built for everything. Not everybody can handle your situation as crazy as it is, and you dealing with your mom and all that kind of stuff. Who else? And it gets to a point where it becomes apparent, well, guess what? And for me, it became a spiritual thing for me because I started to, come into knowledge and realization of in part why I was here. Because again, my brother's 6.5 years older than me, and I've been told personally by my parents they weren't expecting to have another. I was an accident. But as it became more apparent that I would have to be the person to take these things on, then I kind of had somewhat of a spiritual transformation or revelation that said, yeah, that's why you're here. So it became then less about my relationship with my parents. It became more so about my relationship with God. And again, not for those who aren't spiritual, can't take this on. I'm not preaching here. I'm just saying what my personal journey was. I had a revelation. I had to have a come to Jesus moment where to recognize that, yes, that part of why I'm here was for this very reason. And so that in part helped me to bear that responsibility. And I remember the moment when it happened was I was actually in a barbershop with some brothers and we talk about everything there. And I was kind of sharing this, and one of the senior barber there, who's a minister himself, he kind of poured into me. And I remember the moment when all those guys got up in the shop and they kind of laid hands on me and said, guess what? You're it. So that was one way. So when my focus shifted on the relationship or the hurt that I had with my mom, especially because she was hard. My dad, he could be difficult, but he was reasonable. Certainly compared to her, a heck of a lot more reasonable. He was just stubborn, but I can manage it. But with her, there was a lot of hurt there that I couldn't, that was difficult to manage. So then the second part of it was, so once I understood kind of, well, this is your assignment, and I took it as more of a spiritual endeavor, as much more than just a relationship one. Then the second thing I did was I disconnected a bit. So basically, I acted as I was her power of attorney. I took care of all her finances, made sure she got to her medical appointments on time. I took on the role of that as like I'm a manager. Very businesslike. Because the son piece was too difficult to deal with. But I figured, the way I looked at it, I can do these things. So as long as I treated it as business, I was able to function. Now, again, that may not work for every situation. I'm just telling you how I was able to get through it. I became a business liaison for my mother, not her son. What that did for me, one, it gave me a sense of clarity that when I looked at it, I'm acting as her advocate. So I made sure she got the help that she needed. I helped make sure that the social services that were there in place. I made sure that the facilities were doing what they needed to do. I could function in that role. Somewhat disconnected, but as far as the logistics, I was able to make sure the logistics were taken care of. And then what I did was I asked for, especially for the siblings that were close, for the one that was burnt out, she couldn't take on the care, but certainly she could take on some of the support. So what also happened was I assessed who I had to rely on, who I could and could not rely on. My brother, I was like, I can't rely on him. It's just what it is. I can be mad at that. I can curse God for that, but you know what? I had to come to terms that he was not going to be a factor that I could rely on. Mm-hmm. But my sister, she, and certainly even for the sisters who were out of town, when they came in town, they made sure that they loved on my mom when she was there. So they went, they got their nails done. Maybe they took her out to lunch. Maybe they, spent time with her. That, all that kind of stuff, that sort of soft, that's the soft touch stuff they could do. Like I said, I'll take care of the logistics. You guys take care of the soft touch, and we can make this work. And it's not perfect. It wasn't certainly that sense of family. But again, it was, how do we make this happen? So when I was able to sort of compartmentalize it and put things in certain roles and have things play out in certain ways, it was able to work. But it first started with my sense of responsibility that I had to be personally convicted of. Again, that's what I'm saying. I can't tell anybody what you need to be doing. I'm saying what I was personally convicted of. And as sure as I'm talking to you right now, I was personally convicted that I had to do this. And then it was like, okay, well, if I have to do it, one part is just knowing, taking on responsibility. Now, logistically, how are we going to work this out? And sometimes it may be like that. And no one's saying if you're in a situation where your parents need care and you have a strained relationship, no one said you got to like them. Or that everything is going to be hunky-dory from now on, especially if they're in a sin where they got some mental disability where they may not even recognize you anymore. They may have Alzheimer's. They may have something that is beyond you guys going to counseling and getting better over. That was another thing I had to give up. It wasn't going to get better. It was what it was. But certainly up until the day she died, I know my heart is clear and my conscience is clear that I was able to give to her what she needed in that time, and my dad, because my dad died 3 years earlier. I'm sorry, correction, 6 years earlier. Same situation with him. I was clear that I did what I needed to do, what I was called to do. And I'm not good with that. So when you called me and I said I was good, yeah, I was good. Because I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I did what was required. And I could sleep very good at night. That I was in that position. Shout out to Marcus King from Australia. Didn't know you from Australia, but certainly appreciate you being here tonight. Our guy Braxton, thanks for being in the building tonight. If there's always some type of ways you were growing up, or if you started to show themselves after you reached a certain age, they made a choice. Then you had to make a choice to forget them. Again, I just assessed the field. It's not about. In fact, and And at this point, I don't have any bitterness towards any of them. But it's just an acceptance. You have to know some people who can't and some people who can't. I said, my bro, I love him, but he's just not that guy. And you may have family members like that. Yeah, you love them, but you wouldn't give them money. You wouldn't trust your checking account, your banking account with them. Doesn't mean you don't have affection for them. You just, as long as you understand where people are coming from, you can deal with it. The problem comes when you put expectations on people that are unrealistic for them because they're just not them, but you want them to be something that they're not. So again, acceptance. Happened with my wife also. When we got married, I had expectations, or I had this idea what my wife was supposed to be. I had to come to a realization. She's not someone else. I had to accept who she is. And the better I was able to accept it, the better we got along. And she accepts me for who I am. We stopped trying to change one another to suit us. We just loved us for who we are. And in that process, we also appreciate it better why we are the way we are. And it works. So I didn't have an attitude to say forget them. I just recognized who they were, and I just took what they can give. And so for us, that's kind of how we were able to kind of get through that. Yeah. You build for challenges. Yeah, some people, sometimes you're just that dude, or you're that woman. And instead of trying to run away from that or try to carve something that you think I need to be this. And again, Pete, I was telling you this the other night.
Yeah, I was about to say something about that, actually. Like, after talking to you the other night, and I processed it, and you know how I always think shit. You know me a little. I think you know me pretty well by now. And I realized, and I said it towards the end of the show, what we do as caregivers, as sons, as accountants in your case, it takes a unique man to do that. Not any man can do that. Let's be honest here. Most men are unable to do it because they can't process, can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But the few proud men that can do it, I'm gonna be hurt when time comes. I know time comes eventually, like everybody else. But at least I know I can sleep easy, and I know when I did the right thing, like you do.
Yeah, and there's a piece that comes with that. Like I said, I'm good. I have no regrets over what I should or shouldn't have done, or what I said or shouldn't have said, or whatever. Like I said, I'm certainly in a very good place. And I grew a lot. Again, I lost my hair. So the reason, this to give you the history of the 7 Bs. I started losing my hair at a rapid rate. And it got to a point where it's like I just embraced the ball lifestyle. That is the origin of the 7 Bs of the BMU Network. Shout out to the bold and the beautiful, the beneficent, benevolent ball brotherhood of the BMU Network. Shout out to the follically free. That's the origin story. That's my superhero. Every superhero has an origin story. This is mine. Stressed out of taking care of my parents, I started losing my hair, and then I decided to embrace baldness. And I'll never look back. And I have no intention of going back. So yeah, no, I'm not growing a beard. But I promote people, men especially in that situation. Stop trying to hold on to the George Jefferson haircut.
Just grow a beard instead.
No, just get rid of the hair. Just shave it off.
No,
shave it off. You're losing battle. This is gone.
You've reached your limit on talking.
You had that bald spot in the back of your head. It's over. You can do hair transplant for men, size spurling. You can do all that stuff if you want to. Just embrace your baldness. Yes, Isaac Hayes, Louis Gossett Jr., Charles Barkley, Michael Jordan, Yul Brynner, all the OGs, the legends of Baldom. Professor X from the X-Men. Shout out to those guys that let me know that I was part of a very privileged and very blessed community. So again, shout out to the 7B network. I am proud to serve as your president in these spaces. So
sometimes I can't fucking win with you some days.
So yeah, so that's kind of how it is. So again, shout out to my man Anton. Chose to shave, have been doing it for 20 years. That's what's up. Again, embrace and embrace your
honestly,
your
Paul, like people give me shit for my gray hairs, but I got it with stress, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize stress can be a big factor.
Yep. So at 51, hang on, Marcus, hair is going white and thinning because of the family court cases. Yeah, it will stress you out. Yeah, no question. Make sure you also exercise and stay in shape. Take care of your physical health as much as you can. But yeah, but that stress is real. And so if it's starting to go, let it go. And just and just embrace it. So that's kind of where I am with that. But and I know I talked a lot, so anything that you want to comment on from my perspective, how I was able to carry this out, given a strained relationship, a traumatic one at times. But again, that's how I was able to sort of pull this off. So any comments from what I was able to share, or anything that you gleaned, anything that you were able to glean from that?
Honestly, I don't know if I would have handled it the same way as you did, to be honest with you. I'm not going to lie to you. I would have probably handled it completely different. Because you got, I hate to say abuse, because it wasn't abuse because your parents couldn't help it, but
it's abuse. No, it's fine to couch it that way. Yes, you can call it. And again, I would say certainly for my mom, I can't say that my dad he abused himself more than anything. That was more so what I had, the misfortune to see. But really, it was definitely my mom where a lot of my angst was growing up. My dad, he was just of a different generation, and we were just different people. But certainly my mom, there was certainly a lot to unpack there.
So, okay, let's use word abuse, for example. I don't know if I would have handled the situation the same as you did, but I would have still take care of them because they're my parents. But would I handle it the way I'm doing it now? Probably not. I would have probably handled it a different way, maybe the same route you did.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the history, background history. And that is kudos for you. Because they didn't put you through one or two things. They put you through a lot of shit as you're growing up. Let's be honest here.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, I will slap you. Okay. Time out. We do not talk about my beard. We don't talk about any beard on any above his channels. On the Spartan or the Muse channel. Mm-hmm. If we talk about shaving beards, that is a execution line on words. So this is your first warning, and you get a freebie. That's it.
Shout out to Braxton, especially Jada the Rock, Ray Shremmer Brothers, Stone Cold Steve Austin. What? Tyrese, yes. Shout out to the Ball Brotherhood that's embraced their balldom. Appreciate that.
So would I handle it the same way you did? Probably not. Like I said, I would handle it completely different. And that is another factor we have to keep in mind. Everybody handles things a different way. Every situation is different. So the way you handle it, I think, with the cards you were dealt, I think you did a pretty good job overall, Paul, to be honest with you.
Appreciate it.
That's why you can wash your hands.
Yeah, like I said, I have a clear conscience with myself, with my siblings. Because again, there was some, and it's weird because there was a little bit of armchair quarterback, folks on the West Coast saying how I should do things over here and whatnot, and holding my tongue a little bit because I could have been like, well, look, if you want to come back and do this, you go ahead and do it. But again, I was able to kind of maintain, keep my cool. And again, ultimately won them over. Like once they saw the situation and saw how she was cared for, and like I said, I know not every nursing home story is a good one. Again, even the place that we found for her, it was, we went through several, and I've been to several. My church does typical sick and shut in, where we visit those who former members that are in nursing homes. So I've seen some of these places and what they're like, and they're basically just, just waiting to die. I mean, it's not a positive sight when you're there. So I know the bad ones, but this one, it was a good situation. And yes, sure, you had to stay on them. Sure, you had to make sure that you kept up on things, with meetings and all sorts of things. You had to stay on top of things as always. You had to ask questions. But, certainly once they saw, in up close what was going on, then I won them over. And they were like, okay, he's got this. It's a good, a good situation, and they were comfortable with the decisions. But early on, it was like, are you sure that's the right thing? I think she should move in with you, and I think that'd be a better situation. Well, how about she move in with you? Again, that's what I thought, but I didn't say it. But I just realized it's like, again, they're talking from a place of ignorance more so than the realities on the ground, logistics of what needs to happen. And so again, I wasn't dissuaded by that. I just did what I felt was right. And was able to take that on. So yeah, conscious, like I said, I left it all there. And so again, if sometimes disconnecting is oftentimes a good way to go about it. Again, obviously therapy and counseling and all those things are certainly options on the table that, certainly I would encourage anybody certainly to take on. Honestly, and I never went to any formal therapy. That was something that just wasn't presented or something on the table. I felt there's something that I needed, and I might have benefited from maybe going to some. But certainly, the directions that I took, I knew in certain things I was just going to be very diligent about doing things. My dad, the tough thing for him was just getting a place to live because he was being basically evicted from the apartment complex he was in. And in his areas, like senior housing is very sparse in this area. The waiting list for senior housing is like 2 to 3 years. But he found himself in a situation where, I needed a place ASAP. And so what I did was I went back to Highland Park. And I got him a place at Adelaide Gardens, 1 block over from my man Eric's house in Highland Park. But how I found it, I went door to door, literally. I went to a lot of old school apartment complexes. Again, these are places where, people like live there for like forever. You know what I mean? It's not like, people get an apartment, they move out and buy a house or whatever. It's like, Highland Park is kind of like an old kind of town. And people just live where they live forever. Mm-hmm. So if it's an apartment complex, the residents there, they live there for decades. It's not like it's, you just live there temporarily until you get a new spot. So I went all on foot. So I drove to a spot and looked at all the major apartments. I talked to the managers there. Hey, are you renting? Hey, I got a dad. He needs a place or whatever, and we're really in a tough spot. Can you help us out? And I found a spot, like I said, Adelaide Gardens. The guy there is a Latino guy there. And he said, sure. Now he said, I only got a place on the 2nd floor. Can he handle that? And I promised. I said, yeah. So part of it was getting my dad up to the 2nd floor. Because he wasn't going to leave. It wasn't like he needed to go. I mean, a couple times I had to take him out for medical appointments and things of that nature. I had to take him to, but he was going to be basically stationary. So as long as I got him upstairs, I was fine. And thank God for strength because, again, I built myself up where I can carry him upstairs in his wheelchair by myself. Shout out to being strong. Shout out to training. Shout out to personal training. Shout out to high intensity training. Develop a certain level of strength. Again, I was a skinny, scrawny, weak kid. No way back in the day, even up into my 20s, no way I was going to be able to do that. But I developed a level of strength where I was able to to do those things. But I had to absolutely leg days, squats, deadlifts. Yes, all of that. I was able to get my dad, up those and get him into this place, take him to and from where he needed to go. The guy, that was his only concern. So if you can do that, if you can manage that, you can have the place. That was the only spot I could get.
So you had no choice. You had to carry it.
The guy took it because everybody was saying that either there were no vacancies or they weren't willing to take it on. And the guy, he wasn't, like I said, it's old school. He didn't require a bunch of paperwork or background check. He said, look, are you willing to sign for your dad? Are you willing to co-sign on this lease? I said, yes. You can look at me up and down all you want to or whatever, fine. And you check me out. But again, just for my dad, old school Latino guy. He said, okay, no problem. And he got me he gave me a spot. So again, I remember going, Eric knows, 10th, South 10th Avenue, South 11th Avenue, all these old time apartment complexes in Highland Park. I went to every single one of them. But when I went to Adelaide Gardens, he had a spot for me, and I went with it. So I put in the work. I put in the diligence. I was persistent. Just like I went after my wife, sometimes you just got to be persistent in the things that you're doing to come up with the positive results. Some people, they get one rejection, they're like, oh, well, it's not, I tried my best, I didn't work hard enough. It's like, no, you got to keep pressing. How many job applications you have to put in before you land the job that you need? How many clients do you have to call and make cold calls to get a sale or for your business? Sometimes you're just going to have to just put in the work. And so I went door to door looking for a spot for my dad. There was no senior housing. I went to all the senior housing complexes in New Brunswick because that was the closest place that has senior New Brunswick and North Brunswick. I went all those places, 2-year wait lists all over the place. It is very difficult to get housing. So what else I was going to do? I had to hustle. I had to work. I had to grind, and an opportunity. Sometimes, and again, going spiritual again, not preaching. How far are you willing to go before God says yes? And so that's what I did. So again, I left nothing on the table. Was it perfect? No. But I did what I needed to do to ensure a better outcome. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where it was. Braxton, I think, had a question here. Let me bring him up. So for the so-called loved ones to be some type of way, I want you to enjoy this lovely crap as long as you can. Sooner or later, I'm going to enjoy being over you. Yeah, I mean, look, you feel the way you feel. But for me, in my situation, I just felt that wasn't going to be a positive situation. I needed, because again, whatever they were going to give, because again, I couldn't give everything. I needed them in whatever way I can get them. And it doesn't, to me, it wouldn't have helped my situation that, yeah, I'm already dealing with my mom and dad, and I got beat with my siblings at the same time. So again, that wasn't going to work for me. So it was like, especially after my dad died, I kind of made a pledge and a commitment to my siblings. I will be the best sibling I possibly can be to you from this day forward. And that just changed the temperature and the atmosphere to where it was able to work. Shout out to the Lucas family. Again, the stepfather Marcano died a few years ago. I went to the funeral in Highland Park, off the funeral parlor, off of South Adelaide Avenue. I saw Paul, who was there. His name's also Paul Lucas. met him there and whatnot. Great to see me. His mom Claire has been taken care of by his sister Jackie. And, I don't know. I'm assuming that the mom is still alive. Again, me and Paul are Facebook friends. And, but he really appreciated me being there, certainly for that family. So, as good as, Paul's doing well, he's got his family, he's doing his thing. Yes, shout out to leg day. Absolutely. I had to be strong in that situation, not only mentally, but physically in that situation to make sure something happened. Braxton, the times of messed up parents being believed, catered to, having special privilege just because their parents are over with. Again, you're free to feel the way that you feel. But like I said, if the emphasis is going to be on the parent, then yeah, I certainly can appreciate that's how you feel. But as I said, for me, it didn't become about the parents. I had a spiritual experience. And because of that, then my focus was going to be something greater or someone I was going to be held accountable to if I didn't go in and do the work that I feel I was tasked with. So I appreciate that. The Queen is in the building tonight. Appreciate her being here as well. Thank you for all the well wishes. Nope. No, we certainly no. He was off of Adelaide. Again, he lived in New Brunswick for 20 years. And they were doing some funky things with the apartment. Basically, they were trying to get him out of there. So I had a very short period of time to get him out of that old spot and into the spot in Holland Park. So again, this is what it was for me. But again, I appreciate the views of everyone who may differ on this situation, how you deal with that, how you handle that. But again, different cultures deal with this differently, a lot differently than that in the U.S. or the U.K. or certain different parts of Europe. And in some cases, like I said, in France, you could be held criminal liable if you don't look in
Japan too, isn't it?
What's that?
I think Japan too, isn't it?
Japan, they got their own problem in that everyone's aging out.
Yeah, not true.
So they got their own problem
They're
in and
kicking
of
the bucket
itself in
fast.
terms of there's an economic a situation where their population is aging out because people are not getting married and they're not having children. So that's a whole different set. Even though they have the edict, yeah, you're supposed to take care of your parents. The problem is, if you're not going to have kids, then who are going to be the kids to take care of them then? So again, it's every culture has a different situation. And again, you're going to have to, you're going to have to live with the situation, with the way that you decide to handle it. And again, I'm not here to judge that or say what you need to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be a tough conversation that you're going to have with yourself in order to make those decisions, and hopefully decisions that you can be at peace with, and that you're not neglecting or that you're not regretting years down the line. So again, appreciate Lady Navoa. Appreciate the comments there as well. But yeah, I think this has been a good conversation. Peter, I know you're certainly still in the fight. My fight is over. And certainly
both my friends around too.
Yeah.
The hardest part for me is they don't get along, so I have that.
So right, so you have a lot of that. Yeah.
One up here.
Yeah. And like I said, my parents weren't together, so it was again easier because again they had their own issues. My dad with his drinking and my mom with her illness. So again, dealing with them separately was certainly a challenge also, because again, I couldn't say, okay, well, one sibling, you take care of dad and I'll take care of mom. It's like, no, I was going to do all of it. So again, if I could be of any inspiration to you in terms of what you're going to have, what you're going to need to do, and like I said, you're still in the fight of it. But I said,
do you remember Hashim, who used to come on my show at one point?
Yes.
His father passed recently.
Oh, sorry to hear.
He has stage 4 cancer, but Hashim is obviously a Muslim guy, so his father didn't believe any medication. It doesn't come to the ground. It doesn't work. Anyway, so when he fucking told me about his father's diagnosis, I go, Ashim, I'm telling you, like, you're one of my brothers. The one thing I need to warn you right now, this is going to be a fight and a half. You have no idea what's coming to you. So months later, after his father passed, like 4 or 5 months ago. No, actually last week we were talking. And me and him were talking. And he goes, when he told me his father passed and everything, I go, and he goes, I got to tell you something, dude. Like, you were right. And you were really underestimating this too. And I was trying to tell him, like, I wasn't trying to estimate. I was trying to warn you how bad this can be. Mm-hmm. And he had no idea. He was going left, going right. He had to get a job overnight that he hates doing. So he did everything he does not do to keep his father alive as long as possible. And eventually gave up the fight. Obviously, his body gave out. Mm-hmm. And it was the same thing with his mother, he said. Same concept. So when we talk about these situations, and if you're just getting into the situation, you're a caregiver, you're new at it, maybe you're only a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, 6 months, or whatever. If you're under a year, you have no idea what you're getting yourself into. I'm not trying to scare you away. I'm just trying to warn you. This is a fight and a half. You're going to be fighting with the doctors half the times. At least I am. You're going to be fighting with the nurses the other half the times. Then you're going to be fighting with your mom or dad most times because they don't want to take their medication. Then you're going to fight with bill collectors because, we want our money for medication on this. I'm like, sorry, don't have it, so fuck off. And so it's all this stuff. Then you have to fight about your schedule, your life schedule, then bring it into, I want to go see this concert, but she has a doctor. I can't. If I go, you got to give up one or the other. Like, me and Paul live an hour away. We don't see each other often because I can't. I would love to see him more often. Maybe I can convince him to grow a beard. But I'm working on it. Don't give me that look. I'm going to push the button. I'm going to push it.
You've reached your limit on talking. Shut the fuck up.
I read your mind, so you don't need to speak. But my point is trying to get to is, like, I want to spend time with my friends. King Smith, CQ, Paul. I can't. Half the time I'm running around with doctors. When I don't have doctors and I don't have work, I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I'm beat up. I just want to relax. Watching a movie, I fall asleep through a movie half the times.
Yeah.
I'm always tired. Unfortunately, that's the cards dealt with now. I'm going to deal with the best I can. I'm just want to give everybody a fair warning who's getting into caregiving. Toxic parent, non-toxic, doesn't matter. Buckle up because you have a long ride ahead of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you certainly have to be, mentally and, again, depending on your religious background, spiritually built up for that. It's and again, especially if you're doing it by yourself, again, you're going to have, and I think this happens with a lot of siblings. I mean, I know you've lamented the fact that you didn't have siblings, but especially when it comes to these situations, be careful what you wish for. Because I think Lady Navoa pointed out earlier, I mean, siblings can get real funny around these times. Who's going to care for mom? Who's going to care for dad? And when it comes to when they die, when you talk about estate planning and settling affairs and who gets what and everything, those are issues that can get very contentious. So again, for people who apply for that, again, growing up with siblings can be a very fulfilling experience. But at certain life events or whatever, it can also get very, it could also get very difficult. So, so again, certainly appreciate everybody who was part of this conversation tonight. Certainly recognizing those who, again, have different views in terms of how they would approach these matters. Again, no judgment, but certainly it is. I hope this was certainly worthy of the conversation. When you are in a situation taking care of seniors, period, could be daunting. I mean, one thing also what I like about these cultures, these Mediterranean and Latino cultures, because there's oftentimes a lot of people, you don't feel like you're taking everything on by yourself. You feel supported. I mean, especially if the seniors, if they're still well enough to take care of your kids, you can go out and go to work, and you have different people who are willing to take on responsibilities. Yeah, it could be certainly a very productive way of doing things. But when you're certainly by yourself, it could certainly be it could be difficult, even in those. But healthy situations, it could be difficult. But when it is just you, and again, you're not on the greatest terms for whatever reason, big or small. And what I'm finding these days is people are choosing to bounce and ghost family members for pretty, I would say, mundane reasons. That there was no grape, there was no abuse, there was no hitting, there was no nothing, but because you said something that I didn't like, that offended me, and now we haven't talked for 10 years. I mean, you're going to have that kind of thing going on. Yeah, how we're going to survive that. So again, I do think that if you want to make certain things happen, you're going to have to let go of some things. And you're going to have to find a way to make things work. So I think that's my last comment. Peter, certainly last thoughts before we close out the show.
It could be the stupidest comment or the stupidest actions, whatever, but you have one set of parents. Make up with them. Because when they're gone, you wish you had the time back. I'll leave it there.
There you go. Well, again, certainly as you leave the show tonight, make sure you hit the like button here and go over to Sparta HQ Network. Certainly, he would appreciate the support over there as well. Hit the like button. And again, any cash apps that you want to give either to the Black Men Unfiltered Network or our individual cash apps, seeing scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Again, we appreciate the support of our great area audience. Certainly, you guys enjoy your week.
And if you haven't subbed to my channel yet, the Parsons Sparta HQ Network, please do, because we're so close to getting monetized. Just sub, please, because we're so close. We just want to get over that hump finally.
There you go.
So, go ahead.
All right. So for myself, Mr. Bennett, and he is...
This is Sparta!
Host of Sparta, a.k.a. Peter, a.k.a. Paniotis. This has been the great area. You guys take care. Enjoy your week. Take care. God bless. And we'll see you next time. Good night.